Charles XIV and 3 John, also Carl John, Swedish and Norwegian. Carl Johan was King of Sweden and King of Norway from 1818 until his death and served as de facto regent and head of state from 1810 to 1818. When he became Swedish royalty, he had also been the sovereign prince of Pontecorvo in central southern Italy from 1806 until 1810, but then stopped using that title. He was born Jean Bernadotte and subsequently had acquired the full name of Jean-Baptiste Jules Bernadotte by the time Carl also was added upon his Swedish adoption in 1810. He did not use Bernadotte in Sweden but founded the royal dynasty there by that name. French by birth, Bernadotte served a long career in the French army. He was appointed as a Marshal of France by Napoleon I, though the two had a turbulent relationship. His service to France ended in 1810. When he was elected the heir presumptive to the Swedish throne because the Swedish royal family was dying out with King Charles XIII. Baron Carl Otto Mar paragraph RNER, a Swedish courtier and obscure member of the Riksdag of the Estates, advocated for the succession. Early life and family. Bernadotte was born in Pau, France, as the son of Jean-Henri Bernadotte, prosecutor at Pau, and wife Jeanne de Saint-Jean, niece of the lay abbot of Sourix. The family name was originally Dupoet, but was changed to Bernadotte, a surname of an ancestress at the beginning of the 17th century. Bernadotte himself added Jules to his first names later. Military career. Bernadotte joined the army as a private in the RA Copyright Regiment de Royal Marine on September 3, 1780, and first served in the newly conquered territory of Corsica. Following the outbreak of the French Revolution, his eminent military qualities brought him speedy promotion. He was promoted by 1794 brigadier, attached to the army of Sambre-et-Meuse. After Jourdan's victory at Fleurus he became a general of division. At the Battle of Thüringen, Bernadotte contributed, more than anyone else, to the successful retreat of the French army over the Rhine after its defeat by the Archduke Charles of Austria. In 1797 he brought reinforcements from the Rhine to Bonaparte's army in Italy, distinguishing himself greatly at the passage of the Tagliamento, and in 1798 served as ambassador to Vienna, but had to quit his post owing to the disturbances caused by his hoisting the tricolour over the embassy. From July 2 to September 14 he was Minister of War, in which capacity he displayed great ability. He declined to help Napoleon Bonaparte stage his coup d'état copyright tat of November 1799, but nevertheless accepted employment from the consulate, and from April 1800 to August 18, 1801 commanded the army in the Vendée copyright E. On the introduction of the First French Empire, Bernadotte became one of the 18 marshals of the empire and, from June 1804 to September 1805, served as governor of the recently occupied Hanover. During the campaign of 1805, Bernadotte with an army corps from Hanover, cooperated in the great movement which resulted in the shutting off of Machinulm. As a reward for his services at Austerlitz he became the first sovereign prince of Pontecorvo, but during the campaign against Prussia, in the same year, was severely reproached by Napoleon for not participating with his army corps in the battles of Jena and Aosta Currency DT, though close at hand. In 1808, as governor of the Hanseatic towns, he was to have directed the expedition against Sweden, via the Danish islands, but the plan came to naught because of the want of transports and the defection of the Spanish contingent. In the war against Austria, Bernadotte led the Saxon contingent at the Battle of Wagram, on which occasion, on his own initiative, he issued an order of the day attributing the victory principally to the valor of his Saxons, which order Napoleon at once disavowed. It was during the middle of that battle that Marshal Bernadotte was stripped of his command after retreating contrary to Napoleon's orders. Napoleon remarked on St. Helena, "I can accuse him of ingratitude but not treachery." Conspiracy of Rennes, plot of placards, and the governor of Louisiana. Bernadotte was one of the worst malcontents in the French general staff, and this was well known to Napoleon. In the early summer of 1802, Bernadotte's chief of staff was caught leading a conspiracy to whip up a revolt among the large numbers of troops that were being concentrated in Rennes, Brittany. These conscripts were soon to be dispatched to the West Indies, where it was well known that most Europeans were dying from yellow fever. though the plot was uncovered before much more had been achieved than the distribution of seditious handbills and placards, it had still been frightening enough for Napoleon. He initially threatened to have Bernadotte shot, but he wisely backed away after Joseph Bonaparte, Bernadotte's brother-in-law, successfully convinced his younger brother that there was no evidence directly linking Bernadotte with the conspiracy. Nevertheless, Bernadotte remained persona non grata at the consulate and kept a low profile by residing in Plommières-les-Bains. In September 1802, Napoleon considered who would make a suitable governor for the retrocession of Louisiana, effective on October 15, 1802. Bernadotte seemed to be the perfect candidate for this virtual exile. He accepted, and he and his family made preparations to depart from La Rochelle. On the day of Bernadotte's scheduled departure, April 12, 1803, James Monroe arrived in Paris to close the deal on the Louisiana Purchase. When Bernadotte's party arrived in La Rochelle, confusion ensued for many days as the ship chartered to take them to Louisiana was counter-ordered to carry General Jean-Augustin Enouf to his appointment of Governor-General of the French colony in Saint-Domingue and Guadeloupe following the suppression of a sudden widespread slave insurrection. A second possible ship was recalled to convey supplies to the army in Saint-Domingue. While organizing a third vessel to take him to Louisiana, Parisian newspapers had reached Bernadotte announcing the surprise conclusion of the Louisiana Purchase. Bernadotte was waiting in La Rochelle for clarification from the consulate on May 16, when Britain declared war on France. On May 27, Bernadotte sent a letter to Napoleon through Joseph resigning his Louisiana appointment and asking for an army for the impending war of the Third Coalition. Under pressure from Joseph, Napoleon acquiesced, but still did not send orders to Bernadotte for over a year. Offer of the Swedish throne. Bernadotte, considerably piqued, returned to Paris where the Council of Ministers entrusted him with the defence of the Netherlands against the British expedition in Walcheren. In 1810, he was about to enter upon his new post as governor of Rome when he was unexpectedly elected the heir presumptive to King Charles XIII of Sweden. The problem of Charles' successor had been acute almost from the time he had ascended the throne a year earlier, as it was apparent that the Swedish branch of the House of Holstein-Gottorp would die with him. He was 61 years old and in failing health. He was also childless. Queen Charlotte had given birth to 2 children who had died in infancy, and there was no prospect of her bearing another child. The king had adopted a Danish prince, Charles August, as his son soon after his coronation, but he had died just a few months after his arrival. Bernadotte was elected partly because a large part of the Swedish army, in view of future complications with Russia, were in favor of electing a soldier, and partly because he was also personally popular, owing to the kindness he had shown to the Swedish prisoners during the recent war with Denmark. The matter was decided by one of the Swedish courtiers, Baron Carl Otto Mar paragraph RNER, who, entirely on his own initiative, offered the succession to the Swedish crown to Bernadotte. Bernadotte communicated Mar paragraph RNER's offer to Napoleon, who treated the whole affair as an absurdity. The emperor did not support Bernadotte but did not oppose him either, and so Bernadotte informed Mar paragraph RNER that he would not refuse the honor if he were elected. Although the Swedish government, amazed at Mar paragraph RNER's effrontery, at once placed him under arrest on his return to Sweden, the candidature of Bernadotte gradually gained favor, and on August 21, 1810, he was elected by the Riksdag of the Estates to be the new crown prince, and was subsequently made generalissimus of the Swedish armed forces by the king. Crown Prince and Regent. On November 2 Bernadotte made his solemn entry into Stockholm, and on November 5 he received the homage of the Riksdag of the Estates, and he was adopted by King Charles XIII under the name of Charles John. At the same time, he converted from Roman Catholicism to the Lutheranism of the Swedish court. The new crown prince was very soon the most popular and most powerful man in Sweden. The infirmity of the old king and the dissensions in the Privy Council of Sweden placed the government, and especially the control of foreign policy, entirely in his hands. The keynote of his whole policy was the acquisition of Norway, and Bernadotte proved anything but a puppet of France. In 1813 he allied Sweden with Napoleon's enemies, including Great Britain and Prussia, in the Sixth Coalition, hoping to secure Norway. After the defeats at La One Quarterzen and Barton, it was the Swedish Crown Prince who put fresh fighting spirit into the Allies. And at the Conference of Trachenberg he drew up the general plan for the campaign, which began after the expiration of the Truce of Placurrency-Switz. Charles John, as the commander-in-chief of the Northern Army, successfully defended the approaches to Berlin and was victorious in battle against Oudinot in August and against Ney in September at the battles of Großwaldbären and Dennewitz. But after the Battle of Leipzig he went his own way, determined at all hazards to cripple Denmark and to secure Norway, defeating the Danes in a relatively quick campaign. His efforts culminated in the favourable Treaty of Kiel, which transferred Norway to Swedish control. However, the Norwegians were unwilling to accept Swedish overlordship. They declared independence, adopted a liberal constitution and elected Danish Crown Prince Christian Frederick to the throne. The ensuing war was swiftly won by Sweden under Charles John's generalship. Charles John could have named his terms to Norway, but in a key concession accepted the Norwegian constitution. This paved the way for Norway to enter a personal union with Sweden later that year. King of Sweden and Norway. As the Union King, Charles XIV John in Sweden and Charles III John in Norway, who succeeded to that title on February 5, 1818 following the death of Charles XIII and II, he was initially popular in both countries. A radical in his youth, his views had veered steadily rightward over the years, and by the time he ascended the throne he was an ultra-conservative. His autocratic methods, particularly his censorship of the press, were very unpopular, especially after 1823. However, his dynasty never faced serious danger, as the Swedes and the Norwegians alike were proud of a monarch with a good European reputation. He also faced challenges in Norway. The Norwegian constitution gave the Norwegian parliament, the Storting, more power than any legislature in Europe. While Charles John had the power of absolute veto in Sweden, he only had a suspensive veto in Norway. He demanded that the Storting give him the power of absolute veto, but was forced to back down. Opposition to his rule reached a fever pitch in the 1830s, culminating in demands for his abdication. Charles John survived the abdication controversy and he went on to have his Silver Jubilee, which was celebrated with great enthusiasm on February 18, 1843. He reigned as King of Sweden and Norway from February 5, 1818 until his death in 1844. Death. On January 26, 1844, his 81st birthday, Charles John was found unconscious in his chambers having suffered a stroke. While he regained consciousness, he never fully recovered and died on the afternoon of March 8. His remains were interred after a state funeral in Stockholm's Riddarholm Church. Titles, styles, honours, and arms, May 18, 1804–September 26, 1810, Jean-Baptiste Jules Bernadotte, Marshal of France, June 5, 1806–September 26, 1810, Jean-Baptiste Jules, Sovereign Prince of Pontecorvo, September 26, 1810–November 5, 1810, His Royal Highness Prince Johan-Baptist Julius de Pontecorvo, Prince of Sweden, November 5, 1810–November 4, 1814, His Royal Highness Charles John, Crown Prince of Sweden, November 4, 1814–February 5, 1818, His Royal Highness Charles John, Crown Prince of Sweden and Norway, February 5, 1818–March 8, 1844, His Majesty the King of Sweden and Norway. Honours King Charles John was the 909th Knight of the Order of the Golden Fleece in Spain and the 28th Grand Cross of the Order of the Tower and Sword in Portugal. The main street of Oslo, Karl Johan's Gate, was named after him in 1852. The main base for the Royal Norwegian Navy, Karl Johansson, was also named after him in 1854. The Karlsborg Fortress, located in the present-day Karlsborg municipality in Vakarinsiestragar paragraph Taland County, was also named in honor of him. Arms Fictional Portrayals, the love triangle between Napoleon, Bernadotte and Désirée Clary was the subject of the novel Da copyright Sierra copyright E, by Anne-Marie Selinko. The novel was filmed as Dar copyright Sierra copyright E in 1954, with Marlon Brando as Napoleon, John Simmons as Dar copyright Sierra copyright E, and Michael Rennie as Bernadotte. Bernadotte appears in a series of side missions in the video game Assassin's Creed Unity, again concerning the love triangle. Ancestry. See also, Guadeloupe Fund. Notes. References: Barton, Sir Dunbar Plunkett. Bernadotte and Napoleon, 1763–1810. London, John Murray. Cronham, Neander N39. A History of Sweden from the Earliest Times to the Present Day, pages 249–71. Palmer, Alan. Bernadotte, Napoleon's Marshal, Sweden's King. Standard Scholarly Biography, 6, Georges. Dictionnaire biographique des généraux and émiraux français de la Révolution et de l'Empire. Paris, Gaston Safroy. Attribution. This article incorporates text from a publication now in the public domain. Bain, Robert Nisbet. Charles XIV. In Chisholm, Hugh. Encyclopædia Britannica 5. Cambridge University Press, pages 931–932. Further reading: Arm, Michael and Bright Inger Johansson, eds. Scripts of Kingship, Essays on Bernadotte and Dynastic Formation in an Age of Revolution, review by Rasmus Glenther J., English Historical Review 125 No. 512, pages 205–208. Barton, Dunbarby, The Amazing Career of Bernadotte, 1930. Condensed one-volume biography based on Barton's detailed three-vol biography 1914–1925, which contained many documents. Coate, Halvdan. Bernadotte and Swedish-American Relations, 1810–1814, Journal of Modern History 16 No. 4, pages 265–285. In JSTOR, Lord Russell of Liverpool, Bernadotte Marshal of France and King of Sweden, 1981, Jean-Marc Olivier. Bernadotte Revisited, or the Complexity of a Long Reign, in Nordic Historical Review, now Degree 2, 2006. Scott, Franklin D. Bernadotte and the Fall of Napoleon. Scholarly Analysis, Moncur, James A. ed. Research Guide to European Historical Biography, 1450–present. Vol. 1, pages 126–34. External links: Media related to Charles XIV John of Sweden at Wikimedia Commons, Marshal Bernadotte. The Napoleon Series. Charles XIV. John. New International Encyclopedia 1905. Bernadotte, Jean-Baptiste Jules. The American Cyclopedia. 1879.